Being a performer in Bermuda Triangle is a tough job, as you are competing with everyone. However, one performer found a way to break through the mold and stand out in a group of top idols. Meet the new rising star, the very first pop star of Bermuda Triangle, Crystal Popstar Eve. Crystal Popstar Eve is the latest addition in the legendary idol rares that are reserved for the clan's great fours and usually made for a more Highlander-like strategy. But this time, Eve can be her own build as well as supporting the Highlander strategy as a whole. That's all thanks to her two insanely strong abilities. Her first skill allows her to look at the top card and decide to call that unit to an open rearguard circle. You can repeat this process as long as you want until you have a full field or till you see a trigger. This helps us to get free boards, which is insane free value, especially against control clans or cards that can make themselves disappear. Also, being able to search for triggers to check is almost as strong and in some regards stronger than how Oracle Think Tank does it, and this flows right into her second ability, as she has a passive Vanguard ability that doubles the power and criticals of all your triggers during trigger checks, as well as damage checks. This, with the ability to search to triggers, gives the deck insane offensive capabilities, as well as a very strong defensive options, as one defensive trigger can stop most decks dead in their tracks. And losing rearguards won't matter to Eve. The only downside with Eve is that the deck can deck out quite fast if you're not careful, and it has the inherent issues with running great fours in your main deck. No pop star is alone in her endeavor, and luckily for Eve, she has an amazing team supporting her. Silver Singer Cutire is an amazing tutor card that can help you get any card from the deck. We can use it to get Eve to her hand in time for the next right phase. Also, with the way this card works, if you need a field but the top card is a trigger, you can use this card to shuffle the deck, getting another chance of filling the field through Eve. Another great free that works wonders with Eve is the old trial deck supporter, Graceful Prayer Ami. This great free can become a massive powerhouse, and the full field restriction is no problem with Eve, making it very easy to build insane columns. To really benefit from the free value from Eve, you either want to call grade 2s that can intercept or units that can make themselves disappear. A good grade 2 for that is Fleeting Memory Actiana. This card can be a solid 22k beater that can be a free 5k shield, and even if you're forced to retire it, it isn't a big deal as it was a free unit in most cases. Another example of these units is Charging Ache Metre. This grade 2 can give us even more value as it can transfer the free call into a +1 in hand that normally would have been a cycle. Also, the extra 5k power is a really nice bonus. With the way how the Vanguard skill will increase trigger power to an increase of 20k power, you can get some real value out of these skills with something like Greenest Energy Salia. This can effectively make your triggers double the double value. And if you stack your Force 1 markers underneath your Vanguard, then they also get the double value. And that is with only one Salia on the field. You can triple the normal output if you have 2 on the field, which means if your opponent doesn't have a PG, they are most likely gone. And the last card to highlight is Affable Wash Tekla. This card helps you to increase the consistency of your right chain up to grade 4, which is a warm welcome to any deck that relies on something that deviates from the normal right chain. Crystal Popstar on her own has no resource cost, so also no resource issue, and she, unlike most decks, has no actual direct support cards that in some capacity dictates your resource consumption. So you can actually throw in any counterblasting or soul blasting unit into the list, and at the same time, Bermuda Triangle has plenty of ways to replenish these resources. So it's important to keep a good balance. As for triggers, this deck wants to hinge on as many critical triggers as possible, as Eve get the most value on drive checking critical triggers. But at the same time, draws can be essential as you're running a less consistent deck thanks to the addition of the grade 4s. This can be combated if you run units with cycle or draw skills to dig to your pieces. In terms of the marker choice, it all depends on your build, playstyles and situation. Eve can easily build massive numbers, so going for force 2 makes a lot of sense, and once you sit on Eve, you most likely have already attained 2 markers. But on the other hand, because crits count as 2, going for force 1 will make those crits even more effective. Crystal Popstar Eve opens up to a lot of deck choices. This has all to do with the fact that she can fit in any deck because she's completely free, which is nice. For this video, we will cover 3 different lists. One list that focuses on calling a full board and creating big solid numbers, which will overwhelm our opponent. A second list that is a different approach to the Highlander build with Eve at its center. But we begin with a list that we can build straight out of the box, which also carries her name, which should say something. This list holds almost the entire support core we discussed about, which allows us to benefit from Eve's free calls. We have Actiana and Metre to get the most value out of Eve calls, Cutire for on-the-demand searches and potentially free pluses, and Tekla for the consistency boost. But we also see 3 new faces in this list. We have From Colorful Pastel Caro. This card helps us with a major consistency bump. On grade 3, we can copy Cutire to get a second chance to hit Eve if we missed, or we can fetch 1 to set up for a later turn. The other addition are the Perle sisters, Perle and Perle. If we have both on the field, we have 2 28k attacks with 2 crits. This combined with Eve can create 4 crit attacks. This deck goes off from turn 3 and onwards. On turn 3, use your Cutire to fetch an Eve if you miss one, otherwise use it to fetch whatever you need, ideally one of the Perle sisters as you want to set them up for a big push. If you failed, you can use the Caro to get another Cutire to hand, so there's no big problem if you can set that up. You can easily use Caro multiple times in a game as rewriting will fuel her cost, but so does charging Egg Metre. Don't use all your Cutires in one go, save 1 or 2 in your hand to activate them during your Eve turns when you see a trigger on top but you still lack a solid field. This way you can shuffle the deck and have another go. It doesn't always matter if Cutire's ability misses, as you can use it for another reason, but the free pluses is always nice. Once on Eve, you start ramming and fetch triggers to overwhelm your opponent with high hitting attacks and insane amount of crits, as they are focused to guard always 2 attacks a turn when you hit 1 crit. And with the Perle sisters on board, that number can be turned to all 3. Now that you get a taste of Eve's power, let's crank that up to 11 and see how a more aggressive list looks like that also can generate way more power during the end game. This list holds a different core around Eve. We still have Cutire for the searches. Now we also have Ami, which can give us power columns as early as turn 3. Also Greenness Energy Saria, which gives us more value off of our triggers, but besides them, we see a couple of old familiar faces. From the trial deck, we have Liselotte. This card can give us insane early game and also some free soul if we need that. Also from the trial deck, we have Special Message Aurora. This card helps us with the overall consistency of the deck and can help us with early game tempo. But we also have Friendly High Touch Scioltia and Sugary Lording Ravor that can help with power columns when your opponent is guarding your attacks that is guaranteed to activate during Eve turns, as they are forced to guard with multiple cards, making these units super effective. And lastly, we have best of best Isabella for extra power generation and potentially card draw. This build functions somewhat the same during the Eve turns. Build a full field and swing with high numbers, only now less with inherent crits, which can make you opt to go for force 2 instead of force 1. But keep in mind, you will get more value out of multiple force 1s with Salia, so choose wisely. The compensation for the loss of inherent crits is that we get much stronger early game thanks to Liselotte and cards like Ravor, Scioltia and Ami. As for some Eve interactions, you can use Liselotte to call over useless cards to improve the board, like used Cutires, Isabellas and Auroras. Now it's time to take a look at a new type of Highlander build that focuses on Popstar Eve instead of Aneshka. This deck contains a lot of different cards, but all of them except for the new grade 4s are already tackled in the previous build. And in this list they function the same to a certain extent. As for the grade 4s, we have Unparalleled Ingenuity Loura. She has a similar outcome as Eve, as in a full board and insane power, but there are some differences that makes them both useful in their own situation. Late game, when your opponent is already at 4 or 5 damage, when you have a full board, she can give you that final push as you also filter your deck for an X amount of cards. And the other grade 4 is Hard Monopoly Aneshka. This was the reason why Highlander even became a thing, as generating all 3 gift markers is an insane value game. Going into this first and then either a Eve or Loura is insane value. When going for Aneshka, always go for extra 1 if you got your follow-up play, as the extra draw will do little as you already are going to get the freest pluses with Eve and Loura. Also, if you have Aneshka in hand, then Force 2 might be a perfect choice, as you can set up 3 to 4 attacks that can have inherent crits with relative ease. You can plan this far ahead thanks to the many draw, cycle and consistency boost cards. Also, Cutire becomes insanely powerful, as in this build the chance you get something is significantly increased. Further than that, this build plays out similar to both decks combined, as it is a mix from both decks. Crystal Popstar Eve is an interesting new addition to the grade 4 lineup for Bermuda Triangle. Not only can this be used as another finisher or extender option for the Highlander deck, but because her abilities are so powerful and free, makes her a perfect centerpiece for multiple strategies. Entering the big stage, you learn what it means to be a pop star. You learn what it means to be at the center of everyone's attention. But this is only the beginning. This is the Eve that will change everything. And that wraps up our deck spotlight for Crystal Popstar Eve. If you're interested in more deck spotlights for Bermuda Triangle from this specific set, then stick around as we're diving right into the next top idol decks. As next up we have top idol Pacifica, and after that Coral and Riviere. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/Vanguard Insider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, then why not head over to patreon.com/Vanguard Insider and become a patron today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!